My name is Joanne Jung. I'm from the RAND Corporation. I'm really thrilled to be here, particularly because I was here, I think, in this room together with Doorway to Dreams a few months ago, speaking about the first part of this presentation. And so I'm really thrilled, actually, to be able to present to so many familiar faces about the next phase of our project, together with my colleague from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Anya Samak, who will be coming up after I give a recap of some of our initial results. So what we're going to talk about today is the 5 steps to planning success, which is an intervention targeted at young workers developed under the Financial Literacy Center. I think I probably don't need to convince this audience, given the setting today, about the importance of encouraging young workers to save, which is another great thing about these conferences, very efficient. And it was great, actually, to see the kind of modeling done in the first talk. I want to sort of maybe have everybody think again about the types of models that Olivia presented about how people make decisions to save and accumulate over life. What we really did was take a model like that and really think about the core concepts that underlie those types of very complicated mathematical models, and really think about what the basic principles are that people need to go ahead and make those decisions. And with the help of Anna Lusardi, we came up with 5 basic components of that model in a more heuristic sense, to think about what are the 5 basic principles that people really need in ordinary layman's language to make those financial decisions about saving for retirement. And so the 5 steps that we came up with for planning success are on this slide. As we run down it, you'll see that they really are very common sense, but put together, they are the building blocks for going forward and making the right types of long-term retirement planning decisions. From top to bottom, the first is to understand the power of interest compounding, which, as we know, when we're making a long-term savings decision, really has a huge impact on the amount of accumulation that you have at the end of 40 or 50 years. The second is to account for the effects of inflation so that you understand what your targets really are, to know that $100 today is not at all $100 in equivalent terms 40 years from now, and to try to understand that your accumulation decisions need to take that into account. The third thing is to diversify your investment portfolio. So when you go ahead, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Make sure that whatever you have, your savings are distributed across a set of different investments that will pay off under any circumstances. And the last 2 things are really very practical things about maybe not understanding the level of your savings, but understanding the choice set. One is to take advantage of tax-favored assets, a very straightforward thing. If there are opportunities available to you through 401ks or IRAs, take those opportunities. And the last piece is really, if you do have a 401k plan, go ahead and try to make the best of that 401k plan. Try to understand what your employer is offering you and take advantage of any employer matches. What we did was take these 5 concepts and try to develop a delivery model that would make that content accessible and interesting. So our understanding is that when it comes to taking content that we know and understand well and translating that to ordinary people, we really have 3 big challenges. One is that people are just not that interested or engaged with that material, especially young workers in their 20s. The second thing is that people are very stressed out by this decision. When you try to make them confront these issues, they get very anxious, and stress is the enemy of comprehension. And the last thing is that they don't have that comprehension. So those skills are really lacking to begin with. And when you have these 3 things together, you really have a very potent mix of factors that are working against formal education. What we try to do then is develop a delivery model for 5 steps that would try to take all these things into account and work with them to try to reach younger workers. The first thing that we tried to do was develop a model that would rely on personal narratives with age-appropriate models. And what this was based on was some psychological reasoning that vicarious experience and showing role modeling really works for young people to increase self-efficacy. When people can relate to a story or something that builds in principles into a relatable experience, it really helps them not only to understand the material, but believe that they themselves can take action that is effective. And so that was one reason that we wanted to work with a framework that was based on personal narratives and age-appropriate role models. The second thing that we wanted to do, which I think actually touches on a number of different presentations here, is emphasize teachable moments. So really focus on specific events that are very relevant to young workers, marriage, having a new job or inheriting money. We wanted to experiment with modes of delivery. So while we understood that we wanted to work with narratives, you can see a narrative, you can hear a narrative, or you can read a narrative. And so what we wanted to do was take advantage of the fact that we know 84% of young people in the 18 to 24 age group do watch a video over the internet, and a growing number of these individuals watch educational video. And so what we wanted to do was use online video and compare online videos to written narratives to see if the effects would be larger. And the last thing that we did in our year 2 development, which Anya will speak more about, is try to use visual support tools, and I'm just going to gloss over that because she's going to do a much better job than I will. So the evaluation process for 5 steps, just to give you an overview of what we did in both years, combines both qualitative research with quantitative research. In each year, we started out with focus groups with young workers to try to get formative information on how the proposed intervention would work. We then did a baseline survey in the American Life panel. We did the randomized intervention with the American Life panel panelists, and then we followed up with a survey of knowledge and efficacy. We're also at this time in the field with a survey to look at behavioral changes, and those results are still being analyzed. So in year 1, we tested videos and narratives for 5 steps with the long-term follow-up surveys in progress. And in year 2, as I said, which Anya will talk about, we did a deeper investigation, refining the concepts of the original videos and adding new tools. So I don't need to talk about this slide at all, which is just great. But we did use the American Life panel. This is a sample of the video that we did in year 1, and this is a video of that illustrates risk diversification. It's a brother and a sister talking about how to invest some money that they've just come into, and the whole talk is structured around decisions that they're making together and information that they're learning together. It's available on YouTube, so those of you who are interested, all our videos were shot with young models of this kind. They don't last more than 2.5 minutes, so they are short, and you can see them on our Financial Literacy Center webpage. Just to give you a quick idea of the results, when we then analyze the effects, and this what the results on this page are showing are differences between pre-post for our sample for the treatment as opposed to the control. So what they are difference treatment effects for the average people in our sample. And what you can see here, going from right to left, are for each of the different 5 steps, the treatment effects on average for the video, which is the blue line, the narrative, and both, which is the green line. And what you can see actually is that on average across all of the interventions, with the exception of inflation, we did get a significant change, and these are standardized treatment effects for every single one of our 5 steps, although the mode effects are quite mixed. We do see strong effects for the video, not as strong as we would imagine for every single one, and also extremely good effects when people see both. We did also see that for a certain number of interventions, so specifically risk diversification and employer match, that we did, as we expected, get stronger results for the young people. And what this graph just shows is the incremental effects for the young worker group compared to the rest of the American Life panel. And so what this, I think, tells us is that our targeting of young workers was extremely effective for some, but not all of our interventions. And this leads directly to our year 2 work. What we did in year 2, and again I'm going to pass over to Anya in just a minute, is try to focus on improving the 2 areas where we thought were least promising, so we reworked our inflation example, and most promising, so we did a significant amount of extension, which you'll hear about when we try to look at concepts of risk diversification.
So my name is Anya. I'll talk about year 2. So in year 2, we developed and expanded the videos and narratives and added some visual tool components to our study. So based on the results from year 1, as Joanne mentioned, we focused on the concepts of risk and inflation. And for inflation, we brought on a linguist from Dartmouth, Lois Glinert, who really worked hard to work with us to revise the video script to increase the relevance to the population. And then we developed a video and a narrative for inflation. Then for risk, Lewis updated and simplified our scripts and narratives for the risk as well, and we reshot all those videos for both of these. And we added this visual analytic tool called FinViz just for the risk component, because that had already been evaluated in a lab. And then what we've done thus far is we used focus groups to gather qualitative feedback on these proposed new enhancements, and we've developed the enhancements, which I'll talk about. And today I'll just talk about the FinViz visualization tool, because that's the most interesting of the new innovations in year 2, since these others were just revamping of our existing methodologies. So with financial planning, there's a great overload of information, especially when you get to risk diversification. There are a lot of concepts that people don't understand or are afraid of, as Joanne was saying. And what I am an expert in is to study interactive visual tools and visualization and look at how the use of these computer-supported interactive visual interfaces to represent data has an effect on financial literacy and the decisions that people make when they view the data in visual form versus in tabular form as we're used to displaying it. And there's a lot of research on visual analytics from computer science and also some of my own work that I've done in the lab to understand the effects of these types of visual tools to represent, for example, probability. And visualization is said in theory from computer science to increase cognitive resources and expand working memory, similar to how a paper and pencil would expand your ability to solve math problems where you're adding 4 digits together, for example, and but for much more complex concepts. And in my own work, we find that it reduces the search effort and the time costs, and we're able to represent large amounts of data in a small space. And visualization enhances recognition of trends, so it's much more easy to look at some visualized number line and understand the trend as opposed to looking at a lot of numbers. And encourages exploration of the decision space and also increases confidence. So people who use the visual tools in my work, they have more confidence about the decision they made relative to people who just looked at numbers before they made a decision. So I've developed this tool, it's called FinViz, and it helps a user understand the risk profiles of different types of stocks. So what we wanted to do in FinViz specifically for this project is it had a few goals. One, to understand the impact of different rates of return, different standard deviations, and correlations of assets without ever using those terms. So because we were visualizing this, we did not have to sit around and explain the definition and the mathematical formula for all of these things. And specifically helping the user learn about why it is important to diversify across stocks and diversify across asset classes, which is also covered in the corresponding video that was developed by my colleagues at RAND. And I did a lab experiment with the first version of FinViz with what Anna referred to as pesky undergraduate students, who actually in our case are a perfect population because we're looking at young adults, and found that FinViz improved data exploration and confidence, and there's some preliminary work showing that people can make a better decision when they use the tool. So for any level of risk, they're able to get a higher level of return through taking correlations into account, and they're also able to select a portfolio that is more in line with their separately elicited risk preferences. So then FinViz 2.0 is this. So it's a self-contained educational module that was developed for this project. And you go through a series of steps. So we first introduce the tool and explain the interpretation. And the tool is essentially this cone. And actually here, if you write down that URL, you can actually go on the site. Make sure you turn the audio on because there's some interactivity with audio as well. And the width of the cone at the end represents all the possible outcomes you could receive in 1 year. And the midpoint of the cone represents the outcome you're most likely to get, and then there's plus or minus 2 standard deviations. It explains because there's some risk involved, it could be higher, it could be lower. Then there's a tutorial where we actually use Kate and Sam, who are the same characters from the video, who explain their choices that they made, and you go through and see what they've done. And then at the very end, you are able to interact with the tool to make your own choices. And we have some assets and funds in there that are made up to allow you to actually explore adding and removing different funds. Then you finish in about 5 minutes, and you get 5 minutes to do this, and then you get feedback on somewhat of the quality of your choice and the riskiness of the choices you take on. 1 minute, okay. So here's Kate, and there's Sam. Kate can also be known as Tanya, and and so they talk about their funds, and they talk about spreading your money around. So here you can see the diversification components. And this is this interactivity. So as you add investments, this graph changes in real time. And then you have an outcome screen, so you actually get some feedback about your choices. We also had a visual brochure, which was the same information as FinViz in static form without interactivity. So we'll be comparing this. It's designed to contain all the same information. We'll be comparing this to the visual tool as well as to the videos. Our evaluation is in progress. We're evaluating the improvements to the videos and learning the effect of FinViz. We have financial literacy questions. We've added some additional confidence and self-efficacy questions, and the tool actually is able to collect all the user input data, so we'll see what the users actually choose while using the tool. It has a lot of practical applications because all of these interventions can be developed through technology, and once we develop this intervention, we can easily scale it up and deliver it to many people at low cost. So what we want to keep doing is developing and refining these new approaches to reaching many young adults through technology. And looking at the different concepts, we want to look at different subgroups as well. So would older adults be able to view these videos as well? And can we use these in financial literacy education? And refine prototypes for 5 steps into a rollout-ready package for partners. And a much more difficult and complex thing to do is analyze behavior change over the long horizon and understand how often people should view these interventions. That we do find differences in knowledge, will we find differences in behavior? And that's it. The last 1 minute, I went really fast.